Most people spend their lives running from death. Willie Nelson learned to make peace with it. At 92 years old, he's lost more than most could survive: friends, family, fortune, and even his own son. Yet somehow, he's still standing, calm and unafraid. The pain that could have destroyed him became his teacher, shaping a man who no longer fears the end. Behind the outlaw image and the easy smile lies a story few truly know, a lifetime of heartbreak, resilience, and brutal honesty about what it means to live. Now, in his final years, Willie Nelson is sharing the truth behind that peace and the lessons that only a life of loss could teach. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story about a legend growing old. It's about learning how to live fully once you stop being afraid to die. Willie Nelson's story began in Abbott, Texas in 1933 during the Great Depression, when survival itself was a privilege. His parents, chasing better lives elsewhere, left him and his sister Bobby behind when he was just 6 years old. They promised to return when times improved, but those better days never came. Raised by his grandparents, Willie learned about love, music, and hard work all at once. His grandfather taught him chords on a battered guitar, while his grandmother filled the house with gospel hymns and discipline. But even in their care, a quiet emptiness followed him everywhere, the kind that comes from knowing your parents chose to leave. Under the Texas sun, he worked in cotton fields before he was tall enough to reach the plants. His hands blistered, his back ached, but he never complained. That pain became his first teacher, showing him that life doesn't hand out comfort, only lessons. When he picked up his first guitar at 6 and wrote his first song at 7, Willie found something that didn't walk away. Music became his voice, his comfort, and his way of speaking to a world that had already taught him how fragile love could be. Even as a child, he understood something most adults never grasp, that nothing lasts forever, and that's exactly why you have to pour your soul into what you love. By his early 30s, Willie Nelson had turned pain into purpose. His songs were being recorded by other artists, and his words were echoing through Nashville's smoky bars. Yet, while his lyrics made others rich, he could barely pay his own rent. The world was starting to hum his melodies, but Willie himself was still broke. He was married to Martha Matthews, a woman who once believed in his dream, but grew weary of the constant struggle. Their home was filled with more bills than music, and every missed opportunity became another reason to argue. Willie worked any job he could find, pumping gas, selling encyclopedias door to door, and playing dive bars for spare change, anything to keep food on the table. But even hard work couldn't compete with disappointment that deep. One freezing night in Nashville, everything finally collapsed. After another rejection and another fight, Willie stumbled into the street, drunk and defeated. He lay down in the middle of the road, waiting for headlights to bring an end to the pain. Cars swerved around him, horns blaring, but no one stopped. The cold bit into his skin as he realized that even when life refused to take him, he still had a choice: to stay broken or to rise again. When he finally stood, something inside him changed. That moment of surrender became the spark that kept him alive. He walked home through the empty streets, numb but newly aware that if he was going to keep living, his life had to mean more than survival. The man who once waited for death began writing songs about hope, loss, and everything in between. And that night in the street became the turning point that saved him. Willie Nelson's greatest heartbreak didn't come from lost love, fame, or money. It came from losing his son. On Christmas Day, 1991, while families everywhere were gathering around trees and unwrapping gifts, Willie received a phone call that froze him in place. His firstborn son, Billy Nelson, had taken his own life. Billy was 33 and the same age as Christ when he died, a detail that haunted Willie for years. He'd always been close to his son, but beneath that bond was a quiet pain that neither of them knew how to express. Being Willie Nelson's son came with expectations that few could carry. People wanted him to have the same charm, the same smile, the same effortless grace that his father had. But Billy was different, sensitive, introverted, and often lost in thought. He struggled to live up to the image of a man the world adored. Behind closed doors, Billy fought demons that fame couldn't touch. He battled depression for years, trying medication, therapy, and religion, but nothing seemed to quiet the storm inside. Willie had always believed that music could heal anything, but for Billy, the silence between the songs was unbearable. Just days before his death, they'd made plans to record a gospel album together. Willie was excited. It felt like a new beginning, a way to reconnect through the one thing that had always saved him: music. The studio time was already booked, but instead of melodies, that Christmas morning brought silence. When the phone rang, everything stopped. Willie's world collapsed. The funeral was filled with whispers, people talking about pressure, fame, and warning signs they might have missed. But Willie sat in quiet disbelief, unable to listen. His sister Bobby later said she'd never seen him so broken. They didn't talk much about Billy's death afterward. They didn't have to. The silence between them said everything. After Billy's passing, Willie changed. He smiled less, spoke softer, and carried a kind of peace that only comes after unimaginable pain. He learned that grief doesn't go away. It becomes a part of you. It shapes how you love, how you think, and how you live. And from that moment on, Willie saw life differently. He stopped chasing perfection and started embracing truth. He understood that some losses don't make you stronger. They just make you real. By the late 1980s, Willie Nelson had survived heartbreak, fame, and loss. But his next battle wasn't emotional, it was financial. And this time, his enemy wasn't a person. It was the United States government. For years, Willie had trusted business managers and accountants to handle his money. He focused on writing songs, touring the world, and living the life he'd built from nothing. What he didn't know was that behind the scenes, bad investments, unpaid taxes, and careless management were quietly destroying everything he'd earned. Then one morning in 1990, everything came crashing down. Federal agents showed up at his properties with seizure notices. The number was staggering. Over $30 million in unpaid taxes. In a single day, the man who wrote "On the Road Again" lost nearly everything he owned. His ranch, his gold records, his instruments, all taken. They even seized his family photos, treating him like a criminal rather than an American icon. Friends and advisors begged him to declare bankruptcy. It was the logical move, a way out. But Willie refused. He said if he owed it, he'd pay it. Every cent. And that's exactly what he did. He released an album called The IRS Tapes, Who'll Buy My Memories? A haunting title for a man whose life was literally being sold to pay off debt. Every dollar from that album went straight to the government. He toured endlessly, playing small towns, bars, and fairs, sometimes sleeping on buses just to save money. The crowds were smaller, the lights dimmer, but he never stopped. To the world, it looked like punishment. To Willie, it was another lesson. Losing everything showed him what truly mattered. Not the gold records, not the houses, not the fame. What couldn't be taken was the one thing that had carried him since childhood: the music. By 1993, he'd done the impossible. He paid off every penny of his debt. No bankruptcy, no shortcuts, just relentless honesty and hard work. And in the process, he found something money could never buy: freedom. Willie once said that when you lose everything, you finally understand what you need to survive. For him, it wasn't wealth, it was purpose. That chapter taught him that letting go of what you think you need is sometimes the only way to discover what you truly have. Most country stars played it safe, smiling for cameras, avoiding controversy, and saying what their fans wanted to hear. But Willie Nelson was never built that way. He spoke his mind, even when it cost him money, fans, and radio play. For him, music wasn't just entertainment, it was truth. And truth, no matter how uncomfortable, was worth fighting for. In the 1960s, when America was divided by race and fear, Willie made a statement that shocked audiences across the South. During a concert, he walked up to his close friend Charlie Pride, one of the few black country artists at the time, and kissed him on the lips. The crowd went silent. Some people walked out. Others booed. But Willie stood his ground. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. That moment wasn't a stunt. It was his way of saying that love and respect mattered more than hate and ignorance. As the years went on, Willie used his platform to speak about issues most country singers avoided. He openly criticized wars, supported liberal candidates, and defended the working class. While other artists stayed quiet to protect their careers, Willie stood in the spotlight and said what others were too afraid to say. He once told a reporter, "I'd rather be honest and hated than fake and loved." Then came his most controversial cause, marijuana legalization. Long before it was mainstream, Willie spoke openly about its benefits, calling it a medicine and a miracle plant. He was arrested multiple times, spent nights in jail, and became the butt of countless jokes from the media. But he never backed down. In fact, he even admitted to smoking a joint on the roof of the White House during Jimmy Carter's presidency, a story that became legendary. When critics tried to paint him as reckless or rebellious, Willie simply smiled. To him, rebellion wasn't about breaking laws, it was about breaking silence. Every time he stood for something unpopular, he knew he might lose fans, but he also knew he'd keep his integrity. That, to him, was worth more than any chart position or award. Through all the noise and backlash, one thing became clear. Willie Nelson wasn't just a musician, he was a man who refused to let fear dictate his voice. His songs became more than music, they became messages. And as his career stretched into its 7th decade, he showed the world that being an outlaw wasn't about running from rules. It was about standing by your truth, no matter who tries to silence you. For most of his life, Willie Nelson's voice was his weapon, his comfort, and his home. But as the years went on, that same voice began to fail him. Decades of cigarettes, constant touring, and long nights had taken a heavy toll on his body. The man who could once sing for hours without missing a note began struggling to breathe between verses. In 1981, during what was supposed to be a relaxing family vacation in Maui, everything changed. While swimming, Willie suddenly felt an unbearable pressure in his chest. His lung had collapsed. The pain was sharp, the kind that makes time stop. He was rushed to the hospital, gasping for air. A terrifying irony for a man whose life revolved around breath and song. He recovered, but the damage was done. Years of smoking caught up with him, and doctors diagnosed him with emphysema, a chronic disease that slowly eats away at the lungs. It made even the simplest things difficult. Walking, talking, performing, everything felt heavier. Still, Willie refused to slow down. He toured, sang, and smiled through the pain, pretending nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, his family could see how much he was struggling. By 2015, his condition had worsened. He underwent stem cell therapy, an experimental treatment that offered hope but came with no guarantees. He canceled tours, rested, and tried to heal. Fans worried it might be the end, but Willie, being Willie, refused to quit. "I'm not ready to stop breathing just yet," he joked, masking fear with humor like he always did. Then came the moment that nearly ended everything. In 2022, at nearly 90 years old, Willie contracted COVID-19. For a man with damaged lungs, it was almost a death sentence. His wife Annie found him gasping for air in the middle of the night and immediately turned their home into a medical center. Doctors came in shifts, machines hummed through the night. For days, his life hung by a thread. But somehow, against all odds, he pulled through. Slowly, breath by breath, he came back. And when he finally spoke again, his words carried a new kind of peace. He said that dying wasn't as frightening as people think. It just felt like slowly fading into quiet. What terrified him wasn't death itself, but the thought of wasting whatever time he had left. Willie began to see breath as something sacred, not something guaranteed, but something borrowed. Each inhale was a gift, each exhale a reminder that nothing lasts forever. His battle with his own lungs taught him the one truth that defined the rest of his life. Death isn't the enemy, suffering is. And the moment you stop fighting what's inevitable, life finally starts to feel free again. For much of his life, Willie Nelson wasn't alone on the road. He was part of the Highwayman, a brotherhood that included Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, and Chris Christopherson. Together, they ruled country music with grit, honesty, and soul. But time, as it always does, began to take them one by one. Waylon was the first to go in 2002. Then Johnny followed in 2003. Willie watched them both fade with dignity, their voices growing weaker, but their spirits untouched. When Chris Christopherson passed away in 2024, Willie became the last Highwayman, the final voice of a generation that changed music forever. Being the last one standing wasn't something he celebrated, it was a quiet burden. Every time he walked on stage, he felt their presence, the laughter, the harmonies, the brotherhood. But rather than mourn, Willie chose gratitude. He carried their memory in every song, knowing that as long as he played, they weren't truly gone. He once said his friends didn't really die. They just went on ahead. And that's how he lives now, with one foot on stage and the other already halfway to the next world, because for Willie Nelson, death isn't the end. It's just another stop on the tour. At 92 years old, Willie Nelson no longer runs from the end. He greets it with the same calm smile he's carried through every storm. After losing his family, his fortune, and his closest friends, he's come to understand something most people never do: that peace doesn't come from holding on. It comes from letting go. He's watched time take everything he once thought he couldn't live without, and yet he's still here, still singing, still laughing, still breathing borrowed air with gratitude instead of fear. Every note he plays now feels like a goodbye and a thank you at the same time. When people ask if he's afraid of death, Willie just shrugs. He's seen too much to be scared anymore. He says dying isn't tragic. Not living while you can is. That's the lesson he's carried into his final years: to love deeply, speak truthfully, and live so fully that when the end comes, there's nothing left unsaid. These days, every show feels like a farewell performance. Every audience knows they're watching a man who has made peace with his story. And maybe that's why his music hits harder now than ever, because every lyric carries the weight of a man who's truly free. Willie Nelson has taught us that courage isn't about defying death. It's about living so honestly that when it arrives, you can meet it without regret. His songs, his scars, and his story all whisper the same truth: the only way to live forever is to stop fearing the moment you don't. Willie Nelson's life is proof that pain doesn't have to define you. It can refine you. From the cotton fields of Texas to the bright lights of Nashville, he's lived through every form of loss imaginable: family, fortune, friends, and health. Yet somehow, instead of growing bitter, he found peace. He stopped chasing what could be lost and started cherishing what could be felt: love, truth, and the simple grace of another sunrise. At 92, Willie isn't fighting time anymore. He's dancing with it. Every concert might be his last, but he treats each one like a gift. Another chance to leave the world a little lighter, a little kinder, a little more honest. He's shown us that the secret to a full life isn't avoiding pain or pretending death doesn't exist. It's facing it with open eyes and an open heart. When you've lost everything, you finally understand what matters. For Willie Nelson, it was never the fame, the money, or the spotlight. It was the music, the thing that outlived every heartbreak, every mistake, every goodbye. And that's his final lesson to all of us. Everything ends, but what you create, who you love, and how you live will echo far beyond your time. So if this story moved you, if Willie's journey made you see life a little differently, take a moment to honor it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that peace is possible, and subscribe for more stories about the people who turned pain into purpose. Because just like Willie Nelson taught us, the song always ends, but the melody never dies.